In this lesson, we're going to talk about different types of data variation. I'd like to start with talking about this symbol called sigma notation. This area that you see here where it says statistics formulas, this will be on your formula sheet that you're allowed to use during the SOL and your final exam. So basically what sigma notation is this symbol down here. So the Greek, uppercase Greek letter sigma, all it really means is sum, that you're going to find the sum of a given set of numbers. So for right now, that's all I really want for you to know, because as we work through the formulas in this section, you're going to need to understand that concept right there. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the first statistic. So for the past couple years, you've been learning about measures of central tendency. So you've been learning about how to calculate the mean, median, mode, and range. And this is the first time where you will no longer have to do that by hand. Instead, we're going to be using the graphing calculator. So everything we're going to calculate today is going to be given in directions that you can feel free to follow. I am going to walk you through how to do it on your calculator, so have your calculator ready to go. Okay, the mean is the average of the data. This is how your quarter grade is calculated, and then essentially your final grade. If you look over here to the right, you can see that we have this new little symbol here. This is called mu. Mu just means the mean. Right below it, you see that we have a formula. We have the mu is equal to, and then we have a sigma. That sigma is saying that we're going to take the sum of all of the numbers and then divide it by n, which is how many numbers there are in the data set. So essentially, this big, ugly formula is just taking the regular definition of mean and just adding a little bit of flair to it. So let's go ahead and do this in the calculator. So here's what we're going to do. Anytime that you enter data into the calculator, you're going to go to stat. So let's go ahead and start there. Select stat. Go ahead and select Edit, which is number 1, and you're going to come up with 3 columns, L1, L2, and L3. If you don't have L1, L2, and L3, please let me know and I will fix your calculator. Sometimes some things happen with the calculators where it begins with L2, and you don't want that. Okay, in the L1 column, I would like you to put your data set into the calculator. The data set is right up here above. So after each number, you're going to press Enter. So I'm going to put a 6 in there, then a 10, then a 7, then a 9, then a 2, then a 14. Okay, you should have all 6 of those numbers in there. All right, to calculate the mean, we're then going to go back to stat. We're going to go over to the right to calc, and we're going to choose number 1, 1 var stat. Go ahead and select that by choosing Enter, and then press Enter, Enter, Enter 3 times. Okay, you'll see that your data is going to pop up. This is all the statistics that you're going to be using for this unit. The very first one at the top is called X bar. This is your mean. So from now on, this is how you're going to calculate your mean of your data. Okay, let's try another statistic. Now we're going to talk about the standard deviation and variance. Basically what the standard deviation and variance is it's a statistic that determines how spread out the data is around the mean. So let's go ahead and calculate it first, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the conceptual meaning behind it. Here are my formulas for standard deviation and variance. They're kind of complex, but I'm going to show you how to do this easily in the calculator. So for right now, I just want you to acknowledge that this is the formula for both of these. What you can see is that the standard deviation, once I get that number, all I need to do to get the variance is take that number and square it. All right, let's go ahead and do this in the calculator. I do believe we have the same data set for this example, so you do not need to go to put your data in, but I'm going to walk you through it just in case you cleared it. So go ahead and press Stat, Edit, and then enter your data into your L1 column. Go ahead again and press Stat, go over to Calc, and choose number 1, 1 var stat. Go ahead and choose Enter, 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 and that will bring you up to the same set of statistics we were looking at before. This time, we already know that our mean was 8, but this time we're going to focus our attention on this little symbol down here. This is sigma, lowercase. This right here is your standard deviation. So if we were asked to find the standard deviation of this data, that would be it. Now, to find the variance of this data, I usually like to take that number and round it to either the tenths or the hundredths place. I'm going to go ahead and round it to the tenths place at this time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my standard deviation of 3.7 and I'm going to square it. That will give me my variance. So 3.7 squared will give me my variance, which is 13.69. Alrighty, that is my variance. And it's as simple as that. Now, one thing to know about the standard deviation and variance is the higher these numbers are, the more spread out the data is going to be around the mean. Let's go ahead and look at an example like that. Okay, in this example, I want to show you what standard deviation actually is doing and what it's calculating. So as you can see, I have two data sets, data set 1 and data set 2. So you can see that data set 1, just by looking at the data itself on the line plot, the data is definitely more spread out, versus data set number 2 is more clustered together around one central location. So go ahead, take a second and pause the video, and I'd like you to calculate the standard deviation and variance for data set 1. Okay, for this first set of data, I got a standard deviation in my calculator of 3.2. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down. And the variance is going to be 3.2 squared, which is going to be 10.24. Okay, so that's my, my statistics for my first set of data. Okay, go ahead and pause the video again and go ahead and calculate the standard deviation and variance of data set 2. Okay, after I calculated this data set, I got a standard deviation of 1.4. And when I squared that, I got 1.96. So the purpose of this example was to show you that when you have data that is more spread out, like data set 1, your standard deviation and variance is going to be much larger. So you can compare these two and you can see that the second one, those numbers are much smaller. So that will always happen when you're dealing with the spread of the data. Alrighty, let's go ahead and talk about the MAD now. This is going to be the last type of statistic that we're going to talk about, at least today. The MAD is just another way that we're going to determine each data point's distance away from the mean. And then we're going to take the average of those distances. So basically what we're doing is we're determining the spread in another way. So to sum things up, the standard deviation, variance, and mean absolute deviation, all three of those statistics are calculating the spread of the data. So this one's a little bit more complex. So let's go ahead and follow these calculator instructions. So I do have a new set of data. So to clear your calculator, you can clear it like we normally do, second plus 712, or you can go to your stat edit and go up to your L1 and hover over where it actually says L1 and press clear, enter. That will delete your column. Now that everything is cleared, let's go ahead and add our data. Okay, now that we have that first data set, what we're going to do is we need to figure out the mean first, because looking at our formula for the MAD, you can see that we have all of our data values minus the mean. So we're going to need the mean amount. So let's go ahead and calculate that by going to Stat, Calc, 1var stat, enter, enter, enter. That's going to give us a mean of 9, as you can see here. Okay, now let's go ahead to the next page and let's go ahead and remember that we have a mean of 9. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and click Stat and then Edit. And this time, what we're going to do is we're going to go up to the column heading of L2. So as you can see in this picture here, this is the column heading. Make sure that you're highlighted over the column heading and not in this area here, because it will end up with an error. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to create the formula, absolute value of x minus mu. So to do that, we need to get the absolute value first. So press Math, go over to Num, and then select number 1, which is abs. Then we're going to select second 1 to grab all of our data points in the L1 column. Those are our x values. Then we're going to press minus, and then minus 9, because 9 is our mean. Go ahead and close those parentheses and press enter. you should see a list of numbers now in the L2 column. This isn't quite your MAD yet. We have one more thing to do. Okay, the last thing that we're going to do to calculate the MAD is we're going to determine the mean of the L2 column. To do that, we're going to go to Stat. We're going to go over to Calc. We're going to press option 1 var stat. But before you press enter, 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 I want you to press second 2. This grabs your L2 column. Now press enter, enter, enter. Okay, what you see here, our X bar is going to be representing the average distances. So that would be our MAD. This one does take a little bit of practice to get, but once you get that muscle memory going in your hands, you'll be good to go. So what I wanted to show you here on the right-hand side is a really great visual of what the MAD is actually doing. So in the top portion, you can see all of these data points. We also have a mean of 45 right in the center. So all of those data points have a certain distance represented by the blue line away from the mean. Some are negative, some are positive. Now, a distance we know is always going to be positive. So if we were to take the absolute value of all of those numbers, it would give us the results that we have below. Now, if we take all of these distances, again, the blue lines, and we were to add them up together, and then find the average of all those distances, we would calculate the MAD. So this is just a really nice little visual to kind of show you what it's doing. Again, it's measuring the spread of the data. Okay, go ahead and pause the video and give this next one a try. It says determine the MAD of the data set below. After calculating the MAD, for this example, I got a MAD of 10.3. Alrighty. That takes us to the lesson on data variation. The biggest highlight from this section here is just to remember that the variance, standard deviation, and the MAD, or the mean absolute deviation, all mean the same thing. They're calculated slightly different, but they all mean, they're all talking about the spread of the data around the mean.